Hi, welcome to the part 2 of this video series. In this video series, we are covering AZ303 Architect Technologies Real Certification Related Questions. If you find that my speech is too fast, I would request you to use the 0.5x speed on the YouTube cover so that you can understand my text clearly. Now, if you have gone through my previous videos, it is pretty clear that my main goal is to help you clear the certification exams. These are all real exam questions, and the chances of same or similar questions coming in the exam is pretty high. So please focus on the concepts, because without understanding the concepts, you will not be able to clear the exam. The exams, there are similar questions, but it quite a time it tests your knowledge. So please understand and focus on the concepts. Please subscribe to my channel and like my videos. For questions 1 to 6, please refer part 1 of this video series. Let's jump into the questions. So you can pause this video if you want to read it carefully. So this is a scenario given and this is a question. So I have already marked the answers here, but if you want to understand the answers, let's look at the questions first. VM1 disk 1 is encrypted automatically. So this, if you see the story here, the story says this: you are enabling Azure disk encryption for all virtual machines. So there are 3 virtual machines. You are enabling for all 3, and use the volume type all parameter. Now what is happening here is VM1, VM2, VM3. If you are enabling disk encryption, you should have managed disk set. If it is yes, then only it will work. If it is no, it will not work. So in this scenario, that's why it works for VM2 and VM3. Okay, VM2 and VM3 it works. For VM1 it will not work. So that's why the answer is no here, and the answer is yes for these two. The Azure disk encryption will work automatically for VM2 and VM3. If you see this documentation here, it clearly says that the Azure storage encryption automatically encrypts your data stored on Azure managed disk. The disk has to be managed, and both at the OS and data disk, both the disk. It cannot be that the OS is non-managed and data is managed. Both have to be either managed or non-managed, and hence this answer is the right answer. Now let's see this question. The next question, the story goes, it's simple. What it's trying to say is, uh, there is a blob storage which will be accessed by the data brick. Okay, and you need to ensure that you set permissions for individual blobs. If you want to set permissions for individual blob, no brainer, you have to go with hierarchical namespace. Now, always remember, hierarchical namespace, it is not exactly like folders, but it will give something of that sort, that you would be able to set permissions at individual blob level with having this hierarchical namespace. Now hierarchical namespace, if you see data lake storage, it has this option of hierarchical namespace. So if you see here the hierarchical namespace, this allows a collection of object files within the account to be organized into a hierarchy. Okay, and this enables you to provide the blob level access also. But what are large file shares? If you want to store large files, you can use this large file shares. It will go up to 100 terabytes, and it is useful for large volume data transfers. Obviously the IO would be pretty high for those files. So if you see this documentation, Azure file shares can be scale up to 100 terabytes, and which enables large file shares on your storage account. Okay, and it will increase your file share IOPS and throughput limits. See, NFS is just a protocol. It is similar to SMB. And in Microsoft OS, we use SMB protocol. NFS is used for Linux protocols. Here, there is no use, because even if you use SMB or NFS, it doesn't matter. And blob soft delete is used for accidental deletion. Like suppose you have some file and somebody can accidentally delete it. In order to avoid that, you use a blob soft delete. There is no link with this question. Blob soft delete is totally wrong. Like you see in this documentation, it is for accidental deletes, to prevent accidental deletes. That is the purpose. So we will lock our answer as hierarchical namespace and move forward. So now again, there is a question similar to part 1. It is not the same question, but it is similar, and the pain point is same. You do not want users to be prompted for MFA. If you don't want MFA, simple thumb rule: use trusted IPs. It's simple. Whenever you see that you don't want users to be prompted for MFA, use trusted IPs. So this is the right answer, trusted IPs. So if you see here, the trusted IP feature of Azure multi-factor authentication bypasses multi-factor authentication prompts for users who sign in from a defined range. So this is what our answer wants. So this is the right answer. But let's look at the Azure policy. If you want to implement some sort of compliance, so that automatically the compliance reports will be checked, and if any VM or etc. is not compliant, you will get it in a report. That is the purpose of Azure policy. So if you see here, Azure policy, it helps enforce organizational standards and to assess compliance at scale. Okay, and you can use the compliance dashboard if you want to see an aggregated view of the overall state of your environment and the compliance posture. Now, site-to-site VPN between the on-premise and Azure, there is no link with this, because with the site-to-site VPN is secured, but it doesn't mean that you will not prompt for credentials or you will not prompt for MFAs. For if you don't want to prompt for MFAs, you will have to tell MFA, boss, if the request is coming from these set of IP ranges, then it is secured and these are trusted IPs. Then only it will not prompt. So C is wrong, and similarly D is also wrong. Express route, just setting the express route will not ensure that MFA will not be prompted. Okay. So this is the right answer. We'll move forward. So here in this question it says, basically there is a on-premise and there is a Azure cloud, and between these two the connection is maintained by express route. The question says, if your express route fails and you still want continued operations, so what will you do? So in this case, the option A suggests increase the bandwidth. See, the express route itself has failed. How will you increase the bandwidth? I don't know. So this option is totally wrong. Option B suggests increase the bandwidth for the on-premises internet connection. It will not help because your route has failed. Just increasing the internet connection bandwidth will not help. The third one says set up a VPN connection. This is needed. See, if you see the best practices suggest that whenever you have express route set up, the failover has to be a site-to-site VPN connection. The failover cannot be a second express route, because express route is very expensive. If you have two express routes, uh, and such kind of failures usually happens very rarely, maybe once a year or once in 2 to 3 years. For that purpose, if you set another express route, which is a very expensive solution, so from a cost perspective, it is always better to set up a VPN connection, a site-to-site VPN. So if you see this documentation, it clearly states if there is a failure of express route, then the failover has to be a site-to-site VPN. As this is a failover connection. This is what is recommended as a best practice. So if there is a failure of express route, just one step ahead, what will happen is VPN route will only handle private peering connections. All the public peering connections, etc., will pass over the internet. Hence, this is the right answer. Let's move forward. So this is a question. The story goes this way: you have a database on a SQL server, and you are using a query editor on the Azure portal to access the database. So in order to do that, there are these options. See, ADO.NET. ADO.NET is used for a very different purpose. When you want to establish connection with the database, that is the purpose why it is used. It is not used for a query editor. You have an application, and that application needs to talk to the database. You can use ADO.NET connection for that. It is similar to a ODBC driver, as per me, a JDBC or a ODBC driver. See, option C, advanced security settings. If you see this, see, advanced security settings is primarily for threat protection. If you have some unwanted a lot of deletes or truncate statement or SQL injection, etc., that is the purpose of protecting it. See, here you need firewalls and virtual networks, because there are two ports, 443 and 1443, that is being used for communication, and you will have to configure it so that it can accept the request. So option D is the right answer. So if you see here, the query editor uses 443 and 1443 to communicate. So that's why you have to do that setting. So this is the right answer. Let's move forward. So now this is a question. See, here we have these set of VMs. These are a set of operating systems. These are a set of resource groups, and these are the locations. Now, the question is saying is, so what is happening is you need to ensure that all critical and security updates are applied to each virtual machine every month. So what is the minimum number of updates? So since there are 6 VMs, so you need 6 updates? No, the updates that we will create will be dependent upon the operating system. It will not be dependent upon the number of VMs. It will not be dependent upon the number of RGs groups. It will not be dependent upon the locations. So here, if you see, these 3 are Windows servers. So for this, we need one update deployments, and for these three are different products. These are, though they are Linux operating systems, but from different companies. So we will need one update deployment for each of these. So there will be 3 here and one for Windows 4. So 4 is the right answer. So this is the right answer, 4. Let's move forward. So here's a question. This is a story, and what we need to understand here is the keyword here is current virtual machines are inaccessible from the internet. So what is happening is they already have front door. See what is front door? Front door is a global load balancer. It is similar to traffic manager. Traffic manager is also a global load balancer. So you have front door to load balance requests for app one, and they are saying which additional Azure service should you provision, and the key is virtual machines are inaccessible from the internet. That's the key. So if you see here option A, Azure Traffic Manager is of no use here because you already have one global load balancer, that is front door. Why to use another global load balancer? So A is out of question. See, a private link will not solve this problem, because then otherwise the front door and etc will be inaccessible. So private link is not a solution to this. Then we are left with options B and C. Which one will suit here? Since we already have front door, which is a public interface of the load balancer, I think we should use an internal Azure load balancer to suit the needs of Azure virtual machines, which are inaccessible from the internet. So for me, B is the right answer. So if you see this documentation, internal load balancer, it runs with highly available services behind a private IP address. That is point one. And the other thing is it restricts the accessibility to create trust boundary between load balancer virtual IP addresses to cloud or a virtual network that doesn't require public internet. So this is our option. So here we are already saying that virtual machines are inaccessible from the internet, and that is what suits the need. That's why we are using an internal Azure load balancer. A public load balancer is not needed here because the public load balancer with the interface with the public IPs, front door is already doing it. So this brings us to the end of part 2. I hope you were able to absorb the concepts. Please like my videos and subscribe to my channel. See you in the next part of this video series.